How many men are you gonna have to hang to heal your scar? I've already been there, Judge. In your wagon in that hole you call a jail?
Clint Eastwood has had some serious beef with a few actors over the years. You'd think someone as calm, collected, and cowboy cool as Clint would just tip his hat and ride off into the sunset. But no, behind that steely stare, some real grudges were simmering beneath the surface. Now, when Clint Eastwood dislikes someone, it's usually for a reason. South, grab a drink, sit back, and whatever you do, don't even think about. Skipping a second, because here are the top 6 actors Clint Eastwood hated the most. And trust me, number 1 will leave you surprised. Number 6, Spike Lee. Clint Eastwood has had a long and storied career, and it's safe to say that. His name carries weight. Whether it was his portrayal of the lone cowboy in Sergio Leone's Dollars trilogy or his later work behind the camera in films like Mystic River or $1 Million Baby, Eastwood has always been respected for the way he tells a story. But storytelling, as it turns out, is not just about what you say, it's also about who you include. And that's where Spike Lee had a bone to pick. While promoting his own World War II drama Miracle at St. Anna, Spike Lee publicly called out Eastwood for the complete lack of black. Actors in Eastwood's 2 war films, Flags of Our Fathers and Letters from Iwo Jima. These films, which together run over 4 hours, focus on the infamous Battle of Iwo Jima during World War II. Lee's point wasn't just about screen time, it was about representation. Clint Eastwood made 2 films about Iwo Jima that ran for more than 4 hours total. And there was not one Negro actor on the screen, Lee stated. Bluntly, he questioned the historical accuracy of leaving black soldiers out of a war narrative that was very much shaped by the diverse makeup of the U.S. military. He added, "If you reporters had any balls, you'd ask him why." Now, was Lee trying to stir the pot? Maybe. But was he raising a valid concern about historical inclusion? That's certainly worth thinking about. It takes a lot to make Clint Eastwood hate you. The deeper we go into this list, the messier it gets. And number 1, that one, nearly ended a career. Stick around because every second is worth it. Naturally, Eastwood didn't take the criticism lightly. In typical Eastwood fashion, he fired back, directly and unapologetically. His response? The story is Flags of Our Fathers, the famous flag-raising picture, and they didn't do that, referring to the fact that the soldiers who raised the flag at Iwo Jima were all white, in Eastwood's mind, adding a black soldier into that particular narrative would have been historically inaccurate. He doubled down, saying, "If I go ahead and put an African-American actor in there, people'd go, 'This guy's lost his mind.'" And then came the line that really turned heads. Eastwood said Lee should shut his face. Oof, that's not exactly the olive branch one might expect from a seasoned director. Couldn't they have just sat down and talked it out? Maybe, but things didn't go that way. Eastwood didn't stop there. He reminded everyone that Lee had criticized him before, particularly when Eastwood directed Bird, a 1988 biopic about jazz legend Charlie Parker. "He was complaining when I did Bird," Eastwood recalled. "Why would a white guy be doing that? I was the only guy who made it. That's why." He could have gone ahead and made it. Instead, he was making something else. So, it wasn't just a one. big-time disagreement. There was history between these two. Eastwoods. Argument boiled down to this: he wasn't making movies for the sake of. Checking representation boxes, he was telling stories as he saw them. Stories he felt were rooted in factual accuracy. "I'm not in that game," he said. "Make it look like a commercial for an equal opportunity player? I'm not in that game." And just like that, the gap between them widened. But Lee, as passionate and vocal as he is, didn't let it end there. He, later, tried to cool things off, at least a little, by acknowledging Eastwood's talent. "He's a great director," Lee admitted. "He makes his films. I make my films." Yet he couldn't help but push back on the disrespect. That "shut his face" comment? That rubbed Lee the wrong way. "Come on, Clint, come on," he said, sounding half exhausted, half incredulous. "He sounds like an angry old man right there." And in fairness, who wouldn't feel insulted being told to shut their face over what they saw as a legitimate concern? And so, Clint Eastwood and Spike Lee ended up on opposite sides of a very public, very passionate debate. One man, a Hollywood legend rooted in old-school values and rigid authenticity. The other, a trailblazer who has always challenged the status quo and fought to make room for the stories that rarely get told. Can you blame either of them entirely? That's the real question, isn't it? Number 5. Dustin Hoffman. Dustin Hoffman exemplifies the philosophical clash that made him one of Eastwood's most profound professional adversaries. Their divergent approaches to acting created an unbridgeable divide that would define their relationship throughout their careers. How did Dustin Hoffman's intense method acting style compare to Clint Eastwood's more laid-back, minimalist approach to acting and directing? The fundamental conflict between Hoffman and Eastwood stems from their diametrically opposed acting philosophies. Hoffman emerged as one of method acting's most earnest exponents, famously pushing himself to physical and emotional extremes to inhabit his characters. His commitment to psychological immersion became legendary after his work on the 1976 film Marathon Man, where he reportedly stayed up for 3 days straight to match his character's sleep-deprived state. This intensive preparation stood in stark contrast to Eastwood's minimalist approach, while Hoffman delved deep into character psychology. Eastwood developed a reputation for efficiency and spontaneity, often capturing scenes in just 1 or 2 takes. The objective is to make everything sound like the first time it's said, so the only thing I can do is try to pick it up the very first time it is said. Eastwood explained to Film Comment, Hoffman's devotion to method acting began during his studies under Lee Strasberg at the Actors Studio, where he intensified his commitment to the craft. This training led him to embrace total character immersion, regardless of role significance. In one revealing anecdote, Hoffman recalls being criticized in acting class for not moving while playing a tomato. "I said, 'That's right, a tomato doesn't have legs.'" Meanwhile, Eastwood cultivated a different philosophy entirely. He rarely rehearsed scenes with actors, preferring to capture authentic, unrehearsed moments. "You'd be surprised with good performers how interesting something can be the first time they try it," Eastwood noted. For him, maintaining production momentum was paramount. You have to keep the crew and the production going at a business-like pace so they get the feeling they are part of something that's actually moving forward. Why did Eastwood dismiss Hoffman's approach? The tension between these opposing methodologies went beyond mere stylistic preference. According to industry sources, Eastwood openly dismissed method acting as self-indulgent nonsense that gets in the way of honest storytelling. His criticism centered on the belief that excessive preparation undermined authenticity rather than enhancing it. Eastwood's perspective gained credibility from the challenge's directors. Faced when working with Hoffman, Sidney Pollack, who won a Best Director Oscar for Tootsie, famously quipped that he'd give the award back if he could reclaim the year of his life spent making the film with Hoffman. Similarly, during the filming of Rain Man, Hoffman's profound distrust in his own abilities led him to plead with director Barry Levinson to replace him with Richard Dreyfuss. For Eastwood, who valued efficiency and decisiveness, Hoffman's approach represented everything he rejected about performative excess. While Hoffman required extensive rehearsal periods and psychological exploration, Eastwood preferred a more intuitive process. Some actors think they need to become the character. I just need to be myself and let the character come through, Eastwood reportedly told a fellow director. This philosophical divide created friction when both were considered for the same high-profile projects throughout the 1970s. Their competing approaches to acting represented a fundamental disagreement about the nature of performance itself. Where Hoffman saw depth in preparation, Eastwood perceived unnecessary complication. Hoffman's meticulous approach often created production challenges. During Rain Man, Levinson assigned Hoffman a minder in Las Vegas to prevent him from wandering off in character. On Kramer vs. Kramer, Hoffman's commitment to authenticity led him to improvise a scene where he threw a wine glass at the wall beside Meryl Streep, a decision she reportedly still hasn't forgiven him for. Now, the ideological chasm between Hoffman and Eastwood created an atmosphere of mutual professional skepticism that persisted throughout their careers. According to veteran casting director Marion Dougherty, the two men represented completely opposite poles of the acting universe, with Eastwood believing that less is more. This fundamental disagreement extended beyond mere technique to encompass their entire philosophy of performance. Their differing worldviews made collaboration virtually impossible, as neither could reconcile with the other's approach. While Hoffman embraced the notion that extensive preparation leads to deeper truth, Eastwood maintained that such methods often obscured rather than revealed authentic emotion. The famous anecdote involving Hoffman and Laurence Olivier on the set of Marathon Man perfectly illustrates this divide. When Olivier learned that Hoffman had stayed awake for 3 days to match his characters' state, he reportedly advised, "My dear boy, why don't you just try acting?" This sentiment echoed Eastwood's own philosophy about performance. Sources close to Hoffman suggested he viewed Eastwood's approach as cinematically limited and emotionally shallow. Conversely, Eastwood's preference for intuitive, economical performances represented everything Hoffman rejected about conventional Hollywood acting. Director Barry Levinson, who worked extensively with Hoffman, acknowledged this tension but saw value in Hoffman's approach. "I always thought it's part of the child in him, and the child is important to the man. He would always be saying, 'Why is he doing that? Why?' So, in a sense, you could say, well, that's annoying, or you could say, well, he's trying to figure something out." While Eastwood prioritized maintaining a comfortable and calm environment on set, Hoffman's intensity often created precisely the opposite atmosphere. Their incompatible methodologies ensured they would remain professionally distant throughout their careers, representing opposing poles of Hollywood's acting spectrum. Clint Eastwood has stared down bandits, outlaws, and crooked cops, but even he couldn't handle these 6 actors. What made these stars so hard to work with? Ego? Drama? Just plain weird? Vibes? Whatever it was, Clint wasn't having it. And when you hear who made the top of the list, your jaw might hit the floor. Hang tight. You'll want to watch this to the very end. Number 4. Barbra Streisand. Barbra Streisand and Clint Eastwood represent 2 opposing forces in Hollywood's directorial landscape, with their clash revealing fundamental differences in artistic control. The tension between these 2 iconic figures stems not from direct confrontation, but from incompatible creative philosophies that made collaboration virtually impossible. Let's take a moment to talk about something that doesn't get mentioned nearly enough: the intense clash of control between Barbra Streisand and Clint Eastwood. On the surface, it might sound like just another case of 2 strong personalities working together, but dig a little deeper, and it's way more interesting than that. The fundamental conflict between Streisand and Eastwood centers on their contrasting approaches to creative control. Throughout her career, Streisand has been unwavering in her commitment to maintaining artistic autonomy. At age 21, when signing with Columbia Records, she prioritized creative control over financial compensation, stating, "It wasn't important to me to know the amount of money I'd get. All I wanted was to sing any song I wanted to." This determination extended to her album titles as well. When Columbia wanted to name her debut Sweet and Saucy Streisand, she refused, insisting on the straightforward The Barbra Streisand album. This decision reflected her practical approach. If you saw me on TV, you could just go and ask for the Barbra Streisand album. It's common sense. Eastwood, comparatively, developed a reputation for delegation and minimal intervention. His actors consistently praise his hands-off approach, with John Lloyd Young noting, "He's a man of very few words, but the words that he shares with you have a deep impact and completely change your performance." This sparse directorial style stands in stark contrast to Streisand's well-documented perfectionism. The disparity between Streisand's meticulous involvement and Eastwood's delegation philosophy couldn't be more pronounced. Eastwood's sets are known for their efficiency and trust in performers. Actor Eric Bergen explicitly highlighted this distinction. "I'm so used to being micromanaged, but working with Eastwood was different because he's so collaborative, and he wants to know what your first instincts are as an actor." Streisand's approach to filmmaking involves significantly more personal oversight. Her journey to direct Yentl took an astonishing 14 years, demonstrating her unwillingness to compromise on her vision. Essentially, her directing style mirrors her broader artistic philosophy: meticulous attention to detail and unwavering commitment to her creative vision. You really start to see just how different their experiences were, especially when you look at how things played out for them behind the camera. When she stepped into the role of director, especially during her work on The Prince of Tides, she didn't just face the usual pressures of directing a big film. She was hit with a whole extra layer of resistance, simply because she was a woman in a space that had long been dominated by men. she's openly talked about dealing with that classic boys' club mentality on set. Some crew members didn't take her seriously, and there were moments when her authority was subtly, and sometimes not so subtly, undermined. Imagine trying to bring your creative vision to life while also constantly having to prove you even belong there. It wasn't just about making a movie, it was about fighting to be heard and respected at every step. Now, compare that to Clint Eastwood's experience, and it's a completely different vibe. When Eastwood directs, people already know what to expect. A calm, efficient set where things move fast. He's known for this. One take, move on approach, where spontaneity is the goal and theirs. Not a lot of overthinking or second-guessing. His actors often say that. Working on his sets feels collaborative and relaxed, and that they're first. Instincts are trusted and encouraged. So, while Streisand had to constantly navigate around skepticism and resistance, Eastwood was walking into rooms where people already trusted his vision and leadership. Specifically, Streisand recalled an incident during The Prince of Tides when she wanted the crew to stay late because Nick Nolte was in the right emotional state for a scene. The crew and Nolte himself resisted, forcing her to walk away. The next day, it took 17 takes to get the scene right. Such experiences fundamentally shaped her perception of directorial authority in ways that would make collaboration with someone like Eastwood virtually impossible. How did their feud reflect deeper artistic values? The Streisand-Eastwood divide transcends mere stylistic differences, revealing fundamentally opposed artistic values. Barbra Streisand's entire career has been characterized by a fight for recognition in male-dominated spaces. She noted that European crews on Yentl respected her because Europe had a queen. Europe had a woman prime minister. Ultimately, this experience contrasted sharply with her treatment in Hollywood. The rare professional intersection between these two occurred when Streisand presented Eastwood with his Best Picture Oscar for $1 Million Baby, noting that she had also presented him with his first directing Oscar for Unforgiven in 1993. This ceremonial interaction masked the profound creative differences that have kept these two directors on parallel but separate paths throughout their illustrious careers. When Clint Eastwood burst onto the Hollywood scene in the late 1950s and early 1960s, it was clear that a new kind of cowboy had ridden into town. He was quieter, more stoic, and definitely a bit rougher around the edges than the classic Western heroes audiences had grown up with. And at that time, there was really only one man who personified that classic cowboy better than anyone else: John Wayne. Wayne wasn't just a movie star, he was the symbol of American ruggedness and old-school masculinity. He always played the righteous gunslinger who saved the town, got the girl, and rode off into the sunset, with his chin held high. So when Eastwood came along with his squinting stare, mysterious silence, and morally gray characters, it was no surprise that people started comparing the two. But guess what? John Wayne didn't like the comparison one bit. In fact, it's fair to say that Wayne downright hated it. To the younger Eastwood, Wayne had been something of a role model. Clint grew up watching the Duke dominate the screen and probably imagined one day they'd work together. But instead of bonding over a shared love for the Western genre, what developed between them was something a little frostier, something a lot closer to a feud. So, what went wrong? Why? Would Wayne, the elder statesman of Westerns, dislike Eastwood, a rising star who obviously admired him? Was it simply jealousy? Or was it about deeper differences in how they saw the American West and what it meant? To play a hero, it really started to boil over when Eastwood took the lead in the now iconic spaghetti westerns of the 1960s, especially films like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. These movies were darker, grittier, and far less romanticized than what American audiences were used to. There were no white hats and black hats, no simple good guys or bad guys. Instead, there were flawed characters in dusty towns, fighting not always for justice, but often for survival, or just money. It was a new kind of Western, and while audiences ate it up, John Wayne was not a fan. As critics began lining Eastwood up against Wayne, comparing the two stars' approaches, Wayne grew increasingly annoyed. After all, here was this young actor being praised for playing gunmen who were basically loners, drifters, and anti-heroes, characters that Wayne believed undermined the honorable image of the cowboy he had spent decades building. The real breaking point came in 1973 with the release of Eastwood's film, High Plains Drifter. This movie was unlike any Western Wayne had ever made or would ever agree to make. It was haunting, dark, and morally complex, with a heavy dose of supernatural undertones. The hero, if you could even call him that, wasn't a knight in shining armor, but rather a ghostly figure of vengeance. Instead of defending justice, he seemed more interested in revenge and punishment. Now, imagine being John Wayne, a man who took pride in portraying characters who stood for justice, honor, and the American way. To him, High Plains Drifter must have looked like a total betrayal of everything the Western genre stood for. Is it any wonder he was upset? But here's the interesting part. Rather than lashing out in public or throwing shade in interviews, Eastwood actually tried to reach out to Wayne. Clint sent the Duke a letter, yes, an actual letter, inviting him to work together on a new project. Maybe Clint thought they could bridge the gap and finally stand side by side as co-stars. Maybe he hoped for a meeting of old and new. But Wayne's response, it wasn't what Eastwood expected. Instead of extending a handshake, Wayne reportedly sent back a blistering reply, criticizing High Plains Drifter as being too violent, too cynical, and too far removed from the true spirit of the West. He didn't just turn down the offer, he basically condemned the entire direction. Eastwood was taking the genre in. Some might wonder, was Wayne simply stuck in the past, unwilling to evolve with the times? Or was he standing firm in defense of a moral code that he believed was central to the identity of the Western hero? On the flip side, was Eastwood simply pushing boundaries and exploring new layers of storytelling that Wayne never dared touch? Maybe it was a bit of both. The truth is, the feud between these two Hollywood legends wasn't just personal, it was philosophical. It was about two different visions of the West, two different ideas of what a man should be, and two different ways of telling stories. And yet, even in the thick of their differences, there's something kind of poetic about it. Here you had one man, the seasoned veteran, clinging to the ideals that built his career, and another, the up-and-comer, challenging those ideals to reflect a more complicated world. Was it Rivalry? Sure. But maybe it was also a kind of reluctant passing of the torch. Even if Wayne never wanted to admit it, Eastwood was reshaping the Western for a new generation, and the genre would never be the same again. In the end, the two never worked together. That letter, and its heated response, would be the closest they ever came to collaboration. But the story of Clint Eastwood and John Wayne isn't just about two men who didn't get along. It's about change. It's about how every generation rewrites the myths of the past in its own language. And whether you're Team Duke or Team Clint, you can't deny that both men left a permanent mark on the western frontier of Hollywood. So, can two cowboys ride into the sunset with different values? In this case, they never rode together at all, but maybe that's what makes the story so compelling. Number 2. Fritz Maines. Back in the 1940s, two teenage boys crossed paths: Clint Eastwood and Fritz Maines. Who could have predicted that this seemingly casual friendship would one day blossom into a decades-long working relationship in Hollywood, and then, rather shockingly, spiral into bitter resentment and professional fallout? Let's rewind for a second. Who exactly was Fritz Maines, and what led Clint Eastwood, a man known for his stoic composure and often tightly guarded emotions, to harbor such intense dislike for someone he once considered a trusted ally? Well, Fritz Maines wasn't a household name, but behind the scenes, he played an important role in many of Eastwood's biggest projects during the 1970s and 80s. Maines wore many hats: producer, unit production manager, assistant director, even stunt performer, and occasional actor. And he didn't just float around Hollywood. He specifically gravitated toward Eastwood's orbit. In fact, every single one of the 13 movies he worked on during that time was connected to Eastwood. That's a lot of collaboration, a lot of shared visions, a lot of trust, and, let's be honest, a lot of long days and nights under the high-pressure environment of film production. Can you imagine working that closely with someone for years, only to have everything fall apart so dramatically? The last straw came in the mid-1980s with the movie Heartbreak Ridge, a military drama focused on the little-remembered U.S. invasion of Grenada. This film wasn't just another flick. It required the cooperation of the U.S. Marine Corps and the Department of Defense. And here's where things got sticky. Maines had one job: be the liaison between the film production and the military. But things went sideways. The film was riddled with inaccuracies, and the military brass was anything but pleased. The Department of Defense publicly disavowed the project, saying it was a mess in terms of historical accuracy and misrepresented the military. Eastwood, who not only starred in the film, but also directed and produced it, was furious. And guess who he pointed the finger at? Fritz Maines. In Eastwood's eyes, Maines had fumbled the bag big time. But it didn't stop there. In later interviews, particularly in Patrick McGilligan's book, Clint, The Life and Legend, Maines didn't hold back. He painted a picture of Eastwood that clashed starkly with the rugged, gentlemanly persona the actor so often projected. Maines claimed that working with Eastwood had always been, to put it mildly, challenging. With this guy, he said, if you got any credit for anything, it was a miracle. That's a pretty bold statement. Could Eastwood really have been that controlling, or that stingy with credit. It certainly calls into question the nature of their working dynamic and whether Mayonnaise was just a cog in the Eastwood machine, easily replaced and quickly forgotten. Clint Eastwood had a few co-stars he highly disliked. What went down on set that made Clint lose his cool? Some feuds were quiet, others were legendary. And trust me, number one is the kind of grudge that lasts decades. Stay right here because this one only gets better as it goes. Number 1. George Clooney. The ideological gulf between George Clooney and Clint Eastwood reveals how political differences can create professional distance in Hollywood. Their contrasting approaches to both filmmaking and activism highlight one of the industry's most pronounced philosophical divides. Clooney has established himself as one of Hollywood's most outspoken political voices. His activism spans global issues from tracking human rights abuses in Darfur through his Sentinel Project to co-founding the Clooney Foundation for Justice, focused on legal rights for those targeted by oppressive governments. In 2012, he was even arrested outside the Sudanese embassy in Washington, D.C. during a protest. This hands-on approach to social causes contrasts sharply with Eastwood's more traditional stance, where Clooney believes celebrities should actively advocate for change. Eastwood maintains a more compartmentalized relationship between his artistic and political identities. As one commentator noted, Eastwood represents the old pro-union, almost colorblind left, yet his approach to activism remains distinctly more restrained than Clooney's. Also, their divergent approaches to media engagement reveals deeper philosophical differences. Clooney readily uses his platform for explicit political messaging, most notably when he wrote a New York Times op-ed calling for President Biden to step down following a debate performance. "I'll make it kind of easy. I was raised to tell the truth," Clooney explained, regarding his controversial stance. Eastwood, primarily, prefers letting his work speak for itself, though his infamous empty chair speech at the Breeders' 2012 Republican National Convention stands as a notable exception. This fundamental difference in communication style underscores their opposing views on a celebrity's public responsibilities. Let's move on to the generation divide that these two exemplify in Hollywood. Ultimately, Clooney and Eastwood represent distinct Hollywood eras with different approaches to the intersection of entertainment and politics. Indeed, their relationship mirrors the broader generational shift in how celebrities engage with social issues. Interestingly, Clooney once acknowledged Eastwood's influence on his career path, noting, "Clint set the bar. He knew exactly how to do that. You do one that you hope can make some money commercially, and it buys you two smaller ones along the way." Hence, they're professional. Respect endures despite their ideological differences. With this, we have come to the end of this video. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this video, do well to like, comment, and subscribe for more content. To enjoy more thrilling stories, click now on the following video that pops up on your screen.